What if a single radio conversation cost you $50,000 and destroyed your championship hopes in one afternoon? What if the words you spoke in anger, words you believe were completely private, words intended only for your crew chief, became the exact evidence that NASCAR used to dismantle your entire season? That is precisely what happened to Ryan Preece at Texas Motor Speedway, and the full story behind this penalty is far more twisted, far more dramatic, and far more controversial than any headline could possibly capture. It was May 3rd, 2026, at Texas Motor Speedway, and the NASCAR Cup Series was running the Würth 400. The sun was blazing over Fort Worth, engines were screaming at full throttle, and somewhere deep in the middle of that race, a feud that had been quietly simmering for several weeks was finally about to explode in spectacular fashion. Ryan Preece, driving the number 60 RFK Racing Ford, was having an extremely frustrating afternoon, and the primary source of that frustration had a very specific name: Ty Gibbs, the young and consistently controversial driver of the number 54 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota. During an early caution period in the race, Ryan Preece picked up his team radio, and what came out of his mouth was absolutely not the kind of statement you want NASCAR officials to hear. He said clearly, "What an idiot that kid is. He is so lucky his car is so fast. All right, when I get to that 54, I'm done with him." Now understand exactly what those words mean inside the world of NASCAR. That is not simply a frustrated driver venting harmless emotions. That is a driver speaking on a fully recorded team radio frequency, making a direct declaration of intent. That is a man telling his entire crew, in plain and completely unmistakable language, that he is going to deliberately make something happen the moment he catches that car. And NASCAR officials were absolutely listening to every single word. Then came lap 101. Entering turn 3, Preece approached the rear of Gibbs' Toyota, and contact was made between the two vehicles. What happened next was violent, sudden, and devastating. Gibbs' car snapped sharply sideways when sliding violently across the racing surface and slammed hard into the safer barrier on the outside of the corner. It was a brutal and race-ending hit. Gibbs' entire day was finished right there on the spot, and he was classified in 36th place, the absolute worst possible finishing position after being completely removed from competition. Meanwhile, Preece continued racing, and in one of the most remarkable moments of this entire story, he immediately radioed back to his team claiming he never touched the 54 car at all. After the race concluded, Ryan Preece appeared on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio's Late Shift program, and rather than staying quiet or denying everything that happened, he opened up in a way that very few professional drivers ever choose to do. He told the audience, "There are people that you know you can race with respect around and cut brakes to. He was very close to clear getting into turn 3, and I could lift, but I didn't." He also told reporters directly, "Decisions you make on the racetrack have repercussions. I try to race everybody with an amount of respect that I'd like in return. When you don't do that, I'm not going to cut you a break." That's what happened. In those few carefully chosen sentences, Ryan Preece had essentially admitted to NASCAR, to the media, and to the entire watching world that he made a completely conscious and deliberate choice not to avoid contact with Ty Gibbs. While Preece was speaking openly and publicly, NASCAR was working quietly and methodically behind the scenes, conducting exactly the kind of detailed investigation that most fans never get to see or understand. According to NASCAR Vice President of Race Communications Mike Ford, who spoke openly about the full process on a Hauler Talk podcast, the organization reviewed 3 completely separate categories of evidence before making any final decision. First, they reviewed all available video footage of the incident captured from multiple different camera angles positioned around the track. Second, they reviewed the in-car audio recordings in their entirety, which naturally included those deeply damning radio transmissions where Preece had explicitly and clearly stated his intention before the incident occurred. Third, and perhaps most critically of all, they pulled the SMT data, the sports metrics telemetry data, which captures precise and detailed information about steering inputs, throttle position, brake application, and overall vehicle movement in real time throughout every single lap. 2 days after the race, on Tuesday, May 5th, 2026, NASCAR released its weekly penalty report, and Ryan Preece's name appeared prominently at the very top of that document. He was fined $50,000 and docked 25 driver points under sections 4.3 and 4.4A of the official NASCAR rulebook, the specific sections that deal directly with member conduct and explicitly list wrecking or spinning another competitor's vehicle as a clearly punishable offense. The 25-point deduction dropped Preece one full position in the championship standings, from 12th place all the way down to 13th, and his buffer above the provisional chase cut line shrank dramatically from 63 points down to just 38 points. In a playoff system where every single individual point carries enormous weight, that is not merely a financial fine. That is a potential death sentence for his entire championship ambition. Meanwhile, Ty Gibbs was watching all of this unfold from the opposite side of the situation, and his public response was brief, sharp, and perfectly calculated for maximum impact. When Preece's radio call went viral across social media platforms and spread almost immediately following the race, Gibbs reposted the clip and wrote simply, "At least he is honest. Just 4 words. No visible anger. No extended drama. No lengthy commentary or explanation. Just 4 words that made Preece look considerably worse by allowing the entire situation to speak completely for itself." The internet, as you might fully expect, absolutely lost its mind in response, with fans splitting right down the middle between those celebrating Preece for racing with genuine old-school accountability and those demanding significantly heavier punishments from the sanctioning body. Here is precisely where the story takes a dramatic turn that truly ignited fierce debate throughout the entire NASCAR community. Because while Ryan Preece was receiving the largest penalty of the week, another driver was walking away from a remarkably similar situation with absolutely no consequences whatsoever. Late in that same Texas race, Kyle Busch made contact with John Hunter Nemechek coming off turn 2, and when the 2 cars entered turn 3, Busch drove aggressively deep to the inside and hit Nemechek hard, sending him spinning directly into the outside wall. To anyone watching with their own eyes, it appeared almost completely identical to what Preece had done to Gibbs just laps earlier. The questions from fans and media started flying immediately. Why did Preece receive a fine and point deduction, while Kyle Busch faced absolutely zero consequences for what appeared to be the same type of action? NASCAR's Mike Ford went directly onto the Hauler Talk podcast to address this brewing controversy, and his detailed explanation rested on 3 key and specific differences between the 2 separate incidents. First, he explained there was no radio transmission from Kyle Busch that explicitly declared any intention to wreck John Hunter Nemechek before the contact occurred. In Preece's case, the audio evidence was perfectly clear and thoroughly documented for all to hear. Busch simply had no equivalent recording working against him. Second, the SMT telemetry data pulled from Kyle Busch's car revealed something genuinely critical. Following the incident, Busch was turning his steering wheel all the way to the left just to maintain straight line movement, which strongly suggested his car had already sustained significant mechanical damage from earlier contact during the race. The data therefore raised a legitimately plausible case that what occurred with Nemechek might have resulted from a mechanically compromised vehicle rather than any deliberate intent. Third, Ford openly acknowledged that this was now the second time within 4 weeks that Kyle Busch had been involved in a post-race controversy questioning whether he should have been penalized, the first being a separate incident involving Riley Herbst at Bristol Motor Speedway, and made clear that NASCAR leadership will be formally meeting with Busch and Richard Childress Racing to specifically address this developing pattern of behavior. This entire situation raises important questions that extend far beyond Ryan Preece and Ty Gibbs as individual competitors. It raises fundamental questions about how NASCAR enforces its own established rules, about whether the evidence threshold required to prove intentional contact is being applied with genuine consistency across all competitors, and about whether drivers in different cars with different team relationships are truly being held to identical standards. The NASCAR rulebook clearly states that wrecking another vehicle is punishable regardless of whether that vehicle is ultimately removed from competition, but the decision to actually impose a penalty is clearly not as straightforward as simply determining whether physical contact was made between 2 cars. Intent matters enormously. Evidence matters. And in 2026, in a modern era of high-definition cameras positioned everywhere, Real-time telemetry systems capturing every data point and always recording team radios monitoring every conversation. A driver's own spoken words can easily become the single most powerful piece of evidence used directly against him. Ryan Preece is fundamentally a racer who grew up entirely within the old-school racing tradition, where respect on the track was earned through how you treated other competitors, and where real and meaningful consequences existed when that mutual respect was not properly returned. He made his deliberate decision on lap 101. He stated it openly and publicly without hesitation, and now he is paying the full price with $50,000 removed from his pocket and 25 hard-earned points stripped from his championship total. Whether you personally believe the penalty was entirely fair or grossly excessive, whether you firmly believe Kyle Busch should have faced identical consequences for his action, one thing remains absolutely and undeniably certain. At Texas Motor Speedway in May 2026, Ryan Preece picked up his microphone and told the entire world exactly what he was planning to do, and then he went out and did precisely that. And in NASCAR, in a sport built fundamentally on aggression, raw speed, and occasionally controlled chaos, those are the defining moments that shape entire careers, ignite passionate debates, and keep millions of dedicated fans returning every single week to witness what extraordinary drama happens next.